Donald Trump fulfilled his promise and declassified all documents related to the assassination of John Kennedy, although he declassified them in a way that many are not happy about. At least those whose personal data in the documents was not covered up due to the haste in which the documents were posted. Thus, several hundred former intelligence officers and others were declassified. Which is why there is now a major scandal in the US. And the rest are upset that, unlike previous rounds, this time the declassification is not structured at all. The US simply went and dumped 64,000 pages of documents from various eras on the internet, without indicating their connection, refutations in subsequent documents, and gradations of the importance of the information. You can't even feed this to a network. Firstly, no amount of credit would be enough. And secondly, Neurosit would go crazy putting everything in order. Because in half of the documents, due to their antiquity, the dates and names have simply been erased. And some are handwritten in a doctor's handwriting. But you know what, it's even more interesting, because they really did reveal everything to us that was in its original form, without retouching or manipulation. So it will be even more fun to find a diamond in the documents with shocking information. We're doing this right now. Perhaps we have already found one. We are talking about a 693-page CIA report from 1975. In the next couple of minutes, we will share everything that we managed to read in the week since its publication. Of course, we have not read nearly everything, so most likely you will find a whole column about declassified documents on the Kennedy case. Do you want to see it? Let us know in the comments. And here we will start with an ultra-brief retelling of the events of the official version. John Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963. By a shot from a Carcano rifle from the First World War. The main and only suspect was Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine who had lived in the USSR for 2 years. He was arrested for killing a police officer with a revolver 45 minutes after Kennedy was shot. The Warren Commission, created to investigate, found Oswald guilty, stating that he acted alone. To this day 70% of Americans do not believe the official version, and hence the increased interest in declassified files, in which a huge place is occupied by an analysis of the connection between Harvey Oswald and the USSR. This is perhaps the main detail that everyone wanted to know. You must agree, it is strange that a person lives in the USSR for 2 years, marries a citizen of the USSR Marina Prusakova, returns to the United States and a year and a half later kills President Kennedy. Maslova. It is contradicted by the fact that, according to one of the declassified documents, the CIA believed that the USSR forbade Soviet women to leave the country if they refused to engage in espionage. Here the conclusion from the new batch of declassified documents is unambiguous. Neither Lee Harvey Oswald nor Marina Prusakova were KGB agents. The CIA continued to suspect them until the 90s. However, after the collapse of the USSR, Russia declassified its part of the documents, where it is stated in black and white that the KGB recognized Oswald as unreliable and refused to recruit him. Documents for an exit visa were given to him and his wife because Oswald was recognized as a person of no value, which is understandable given Lee Harvey's mental problems. A KGB officer under the pseudonym Slava directly reported this to the CIA on November 2, 1991, calling Oswald nothing less than a mediocrity. This fits in with the official version, although there is something funny in the new batch of documents. So, immediately after Kennedy's assassination, the U.S. Embassy in Australia received a call in which a man who introduced himself as a Polish driver stated that Kennedy's assassination was financed by the USSR and that the bounty on his head was allegedly set at $100,000. The CIA director in Melbourne conducted a search for the caller, but he was found to be mentally ill. Despite this, the head of Australia's intelligence services, Sir Charles Spry, asked the CIA to classify the fact of the investigation of these calls to the embassy. They were only declassified now, the same way the interview with Anatoly Galitsin was declassified. A KGB defector spy who worked for the CIA from 1961 to 1964. The interview describes how Galitsin had invaluable information that helped the CIA declassify a couple of real Soviet spies. Moreover, Galitsin openly called the CIA an outdated intelligence agency that was losing out to the KGB.
They asked to write a report on improving the work of the special services personally for John Kennedy. And Galitsin drew attention to the suspiciousness of Lee Harvey Oswald, and also hinted to the CIA that the USSR wanted to kill Richard Nixon if he had won the elections in 1960. Even more fun is the story of the defector from the USSR Yuri Ivanovich Nosenko. The KGB agent contacted the CIA in 1962 and was taken to the United States in 1964, where he was kept in custody for 3 years, periodically consulting on various issues, including the assassination of Kennedy. Nosenko did not tell anything sensible, but at the expense of U.S. taxpayers, Nosenko, together with CIA agents. At least twice went on pleasure trips to Florida, where, as noted in the document, at the expense of the CIA, women of easy virtue were provided to him with checks. We will return to the professionalism of the CIA's work, but for now to one of the most mysterious files. In July 1963, Sergei Chernykh wrote to the British Embassy in the United States that Lee Harvey Oswald would soon kill John Kennedy. And Chernykh also wrote that Martin Luther King would soon be killed, which later happened. In connection with this, there is already a storm of theories on the Western Internet that the USSR was behind the murder, and the CIA allegedly ineptly ignored numerous warnings. Moreover, new files confirmed that the CIA was monitoring Lee Harvey Oswald, especially during his trip to Mexico to the USSR embassy, which occurred shortly before the assassination attempt on Kennedy. But the trouble here is that these same files list about 50 more people who were also being monitored by the CIA, who also had their own Sergei Chernykh, who said that they swear on their mothers that he would kill Kennedy. After all, it was the Cold War and the peak of spy hysteria, so the CIA should not be particularly blamed here. On the contrary, the new documents only confirm that the official version, voiced back in 1964, is very close to the truth. The CIA did not find not only a shooter other than Oswald, but even a hint of anyone with a rifle within the shooting range. Although they searched, as you understand, every molecule, another conspiracy theory has also been refuted, because not only Kennedy was wounded, but also Texas Governor John Connally. The official report said that it was the same bullet that passed through Kennedy, but skeptics doubted and looked for a second shooter. Now they definitely have no chance, because the declassified ballistic examination clearly confirmed that the two were wounded by the same bullet. For Kennedy, through whom the bullet passed first, it was fatal. The last clue that remains for conspiracy theorists is a 1967 CIA memo that describes how, after Kennedy's assassination, a U.S. Army intelligence officer named Gary Underhill fled Washington and told a friend that a small group within the CIA was behind the assassination. And less than 6 months later, Underhill was found dead in his Washington apartment, and a doctor ruled it a suicide. It's a strange story, but again, the only clue is that in 1967, the investigation found Underhill's connection to the Kennedy assassination to be insignificant, and the rift between Kennedy and the CIA was not really addressed at the time. Although declassified documents show that Kennedy and the CIA were not just at odds, they were openly feuding. The memo, written by Kennedy aide Arthur Schlesinger, accuses the CIA of taking over U.S. foreign policy and having CIA agents literally sitting in embassies, France and other countries, preventing the President and the State Department from doing their jobs. There are also several files in the documents detailing the CIA's methods of that era. For example, the agency X-rayed entire rooms to find hidden microphones. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. An internal CIA report from 1975 has been declassified, asking the authors to identify cases where the agency had exceeded its authority. The report ended up running 693 pages. And my dear, it's all there is to it, starting with the fact that the CIA monitored the authors of all the books, investigating Kennedy's death and ending with more serious crimes. Remember old Sergei Chernykh? He would later sue for torture, chemistry, and testing experimental drugs on him. Also declassified is the CIA's funding of propaganda in Latin American countries, where a special role was given to women, students, and workers, seeing them as subversives against unwanted governments. The CIA conducted reconnaissance, violating everything. In the light of American citizens' rights, wiretapped the embassy, fabricated information that protests against the Vietnam War were financed from abroad, persecuted communists, calling them anyone, and of course, spent money wherever it went, which includes the story where a KGB spy was paid for prostitutes. One of the funniest CIA operations was that they poured a lot of money into the young Communist Party Japan to promote it in the country, all this with one single goal: to distract attention from the real Communist Party of Japan, take away its votes, destroy its reputation, and then destroy the reputation of the young communists supported by the party by burning their ties with the USSR embassy. It is not entirely clear how this relates to the Kennedy case, but most likely the situation is similar to September 11th. Then the United States also began to look in all directions and fight 360 degrees, not fully understanding. A threat has definitely come. Well, as for Kennedy, his case declassified, the most anticipated document by the community. This is a real report on the Bay of Pigs operation. This is when the United States tried to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba and failed shamefully. The story has nothing to do with our video, but if you would like an analysis, write in the comments. What is interesting here is that the planning, preparation and implementation of the operation were so incompetent that Kennedy blew up after its failure. His assistant Arthur Schlesinger was developing the bill. A complete reformation of the CIA's work, which, as you understand, the CIA itself did not particularly like. And thus, at the moment, new, declassified documents have given a bunch of interesting details, but globally everyone remained with their own. Most historians are inclined to the official version, and the declassified files confirm that Oswald was sent away from the USSR, was not taken into the KGB, and even his wife buried him with her testimony, and Oswald, by the way, before Kennedy's assassination attempted to kill retired General Edwin Walker, and there it is certainly unlikely to have been on orders. But on the other hand, those who want to see the CIA's trace in the assassination attempt will also find interesting documents for themselves. Here you have the mysterious suicide of Jerry Underhill, committed with the wrong hand, because Jerry was right-handed, and the gun was found on the left. Here you have the open feud between Kennedy and the CIA due to the Bay of Pigs and the CIA's interference in the president's foreign policy. And we haven't even touched on the Mafia, which also expresses dissatisfaction with Kennedy's policies in newly declassified documents. For now, the status quo remains and supporters of various theories stick to their guns, while you and I get a ton of content about how the CIA sponsored prostitutes, conducted undercover operations in Japan, and recruited KGB agents. If you want more document analysis, let us know in the comments. And that's all for now, until next time, friends.